Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation, about the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. Thank you to the 6 members of Congress who are joining us today, Congresswoman Jayapal from my home state of Washington, Congressman Garcia from Illinois, Congresswoman Escobar from Texas, Congresswoman Chu from California, and Congresswoman Clark and Ocasio-Cortez from New York. Thank you. The 6 of you are the original co-sponsors of the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. Thank you for your leadership and support in fighting for a more just America, one where immigrants and refugees thrive. Thank you to Laura and Perla, 2 brave sisters from the Firm Action family, who will share a bit about themselves and what creating the Roadmap to Citizenship would mean for them. I am Roxana Neruzzi, Deputy Director of One America Votes in Washington State. We are proud members of the Firm Action family, and we are proud that our former founder and executive director, and now Congresswoman Jayapal, is introducing this important resolution that is rooted in the needs of immigrant and refugee families. The Roadmap to Freedom is our vision to transform the immigration system to one that actually works for our people, to make it humane and fair for all. I want to also take a moment to acknowledge our movement family who was just at the Washington Monument, marking the 4th anniversary of the Muslim ban. We have a packed lineup of leaders today, so without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Congresswoman Jayapal.
There we go. Hello, everybody. And Roxana, thank you so much for that introduction. I couldn't be prouder of One America and the work that you are doing to fight for immigrant rights and immigrant justice every single day. Makes me so proud, but it makes our state proud too, and our country. And also to be here with Lawrence Benito from the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and the Firm Action community, as well as our community members that are going to talk in real terms about what this means for real people. The Firm Action community has been leading the way for humane and comprehensive immigration reform that America has been in need of for many decades. And I want to thank my colleagues, Representatives Garcia, Clark, Escobar, Chu, and Ocasio-Cortez. These are the champions of immigration in our Congress. They are friends, they are leaders, and incredible inspirations for people in their districts and their states and across the country. So thank you to my colleagues for joining me today and for helping put together with your edits and your wisdom this Roadmap to Freedom resolution. As members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, and the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and of course, as the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, we represent immigrants and vibrant immigrant communities across America. I couldn't ask for better partners in this urgent work. I am a proud immigrant to the United States. As someone who came to this country alone at the age of 16, who went on to start One America, now the largest immigrant rights organization in Washington state that Roxana now leads, and a person who is one of only 14 naturalized citizens serving in Congress today, I can't begin to tell you what a relief it is to finally be thinking not about the 4 xenophobic years of pain and cruelty and harm and torture on immigrants, our families, and our communities that we have all experienced, but on the roadmap to freedom. And that is why this is so important. We are not just about simply reversing the hateful immigration policies of the last 4 years. America's racist and xenophobic immigration system has been broken for decades. And as we begin a new presidential administration, we need to finally leave our country's long history of criminalizing immigration and separating families behind. We need to enact reforms that focus on respect and dignity, family unity, and opportunity for all immigrants. That is why I'm so proud to introduce the Roadmap to Freedom resolution today that has been endorsed by more than 60 organizations, developed in close consultation with grassroots groups like Firm Action, labor advocates, civil rights advocates, and racial justice advocates. This resolution is a bold, progressive, visionary North Star for what humane immigration policy looks like. At the core of the roadmap is a celebration of the value, dignity, and humanity of immigrants to our country, and an acknowledgement that for far too long, Congress has approached immigration reform through trade-offs, trading protections for some in exchange for increased enforcement. Now is the time to move away from that harmful dynamic and put forward a new set of principles that must underlie any piece of immigration policy that we pass. Our resolution reestablishes the United States as a beacon of hope and humanitarian protection in several critical ways. First, it ensures a fair immigration process that establishes a roadmap to citizenship for the full 11 million while centering family unity and promoting and preserving diversity. Second, it welcomes immigrants by supporting integration efforts and ensuring access to critical public services. As someone who helped create the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in Seattle and a co-founding member of the National Partnership for New Americans, I know how important it is to provide our newest Americans with essential integration aspects like employment attainment, language access, and civic engagement. Third, the resolution brings an understanding that we must uphold the rights of all workers. We know that immigrants across America are working on the front lines of this pandemic, keeping our country running while being called essential, but too often treated as expendable. That must change during the pandemic and forever. Fourth, the roadmap to freedom invests in border policy that protects the rights of communities in the borderlands. Not only do we want to stop building walls, but we need to end the mass militarization of the region while upholding the civil rights of those who call it home. And I am so proud to have as a lead co-sponsor of the resolution, Veronica Escobar, who represents part of that border community. And finally, core to the resolution, our vision creates a just way to uphold immigration laws. This includes by prioritizing the freedom of immigrants, investing in humane, community-based alternatives to detention, and creating scalable consequences for enforcement. Detention is not the answer. Deportation is not the answer. Criminalizing immigration and immigrants is not the answer. We need to modernize the system and have reasonable, humane, and dignified options on the table that don't rip families apart. Thanks to the organizing that we've done over the years and the pressure we've built up, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have already announced a sweeping immigration plan. It's a powerful testament to our movement that they released it within the first week of their presidency. So we're looking forward to reviewing that plan and working with them and with our colleagues, Linda Sanchez and Bob Menendez in the House and the Senate, to strengthen that plan. The roadmap to freedom will be our visionary document. It will be the North Star for any necessary immigration policy reform. And by following it, we will finally establish a just, humane immigration system. Now, none of this happens without the organizers who are doing the work each day. And I say that as an organizer myself, who was in the streets fighting for immigration reform for 15 years before coming to Congress. So I want to pause here and turn things over to one of America's great leaders on immigrant justice, who organizes on behalf of immigrants and our communities, my friend Lawrence Benito of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And after we hear from Lawrence, we'll also have the opportunity to hear from my colleagues who helped put this roadmap together. I look forward to working with all of you in the days, weeks, and months ahead to make all of this a reality. Lawrence, welcome.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So glad to see you, a former colleague, in the fight, now organizing in the halls of Congress. Thank you for your leadership in these endeavors. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lawrence Benito, and I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and one of the co-chairs of Firm Action, the country's largest network of immigrant rights groups. I'm honored to be joined here today with 6 members of Congress and my movement colleagues, each dedicated to the long overdue transformation of our country's immigration system. I'm excited to be a part of the movement, laying out the groundwork for a transformative shift in the treatment of immigrant and refugee communities who, through their many contributions, have enriched American culture and have embodied this country's most esteemed values. First, I want to thank the members of Congress who have joined us here today. They are the original co-sponsors of the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. They are the real OGs. You've just heard from Congresswoman Jayapal about the nuts and bolts of the resolution, and I realize that it's sometimes easy to minimize the impact that our policies have on the everyday lives of our broader community. I want to emphasize that the idea of this resolution was and is centered on the lives of impacted people. That is, the lives and experiences of immigrants who have built their lives here and deserve the right to stay in the country they call home. We are working against the backdrop of a pandemic that has disproportionately impacted the lives of immigrants and communities of color, who are already dealing with and barely surviving existing health and economic crises that have only been intensified by COVID-19. These same families need swift action through a recovery bill that includes everyone, regardless of immigration status, and ensures access to all the resources they need to survive and care for their families, including affordable housing, equitable health care, and direct cash payments. Let's not forget that the 5 million undocumented essential workers are still deportable. Immigrant communities are one step closer to living the lives they deserve to live because of the swift and decisive day one actions of the Biden-Harris administration, but they can't wait any longer. We have to work together. Congress and the White House must work together. As a movement, we must stand in solidarity with each other to fight for solutions that are rooted in lived experiences. We have power. We, immigrant, Black, API, Indigenous, and Latinx people are the power that have shifted the dynamics in Washington. Members of Congress should take note of the leadership shown by the representatives who are here today and those who have co-sponsored the resolution. Together, we can ensure a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million and that all immigrants have the opportunity to thrive. Now I'd like to turn it over to my congressman, our OG, our brother in the struggle, Representative Chuy Garcia. Thank you for joining us today and for your leadership in fighting for the immigrant families of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you for your very kind words. Lawrence, it's great to be with you today. And yes, special thanks to Congresswoman Jayapal for your tenacity and leadership and for spearheading Roadmap to Freedom, which is a bold and progressive vision for a humane and fair immigration system. And finally, thank you to all the groups for your hard work. The changes we're witnessing in the past week alone are a testament to your years of organizing and advocacy. Since President Biden and Vice President Harris were sworn in last week, we've already seen significant steps to undo Trump's cruel policies. What we've seen is good, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. With a Democratic House, Senate, and White House, we have an opportunity to rewrite immigration laws steeped in racism and white supremacy. We're introducing the Roadmap to Freedom because we share a fundamental belief that every person, regardless of status, race, or country of origin, deserves dignity, compassion, and a chance to work hard and make a better life for themselves. We should be a welcoming country, not one that turns its back on immigrants seeking refuge. My father was a bracero. He came to the U.S. as a farm worker and worked hard to get my mother and me to the U.S. My parents, like so many, put their lives, their hopes, and their dreams on the line. All they wanted was a chance to give their children a better life, a shot they never had. What were the chances that their young boy who came to the U.S. as a child would grow up to be a member of Congress representing the same neighborhoods they called home? That's the power of the American possibilities. It inspires. It brings people from across the world to our shores seeking opportunity. Donald Trump shut the door on the version of our country. Instead, he closed the doors to America. He caged children and told the world to stay away. And that's just not who we are. And it's not who the founding fathers intended us to be. The roadmap to freedom is our blueprint to restore America as a beacon of hope and opportunity in the world. It's a blueprint for how we can get back to living our values as a nation of immigrants. Specifically, the roadmap to freedom protects and strengthens a fair process centered on keeping families together, invests in community-based alternatives to detention, increases protections for all workers regardless of status, and establishes a humane and effective border policy, and ultimately establishes a just, compassionate immigration system. No more children in cages and no more family separation. Those days are over. We must put the horrors of the Trump administration behind us, but also make certain we never go back. I've watched too many families to count ripped and torn apart in my own neighborhood in Chicago. These are my friends and these are my neighbors. Imagine dropping your children off at school, not knowing if you'll see them again at night. Imagine a child waiting for their father to pick them up from school, only to learn that they've been taken by ICE. Immigrant families have been forced into the shadows, forced into a life of constant fear and trauma, and it's wrong. That's why I'm so proud of the swift actions President Biden has already taken: a moratorium on deportations, an end to the zero tolerance policy that forced child separation, the restoration of the DACA program. Those steps are important. But what we are introducing today is a comprehensive roadmap to return America to a nation that welcomes and celebrates its diversity. This resolution is a bold blueprint for creating a truly just and compassionate immigration system. I'm proud to join Representative Jayapal in introducing this landmark statement of our principles and a path forward. Algunas palabras en español. A ver. La ruta hacia la libertad es una propuesta encabezada por mi colega Perla Jayapal, que representa una visión progresista para tener un sistema migratorio humano y justo. Gracias a todos los grupos y organizaciones que han hecho esto posible. Sin su trabajo no estaríamos aquí hoy. Les agradezco profundamente por todo lo que han hecho y por traernos a este día a todos ustedes. Con mayoría demócrata en la Casa de Representantes, en el Senado y la Casa Blanca, tenemos una oportunidad para reescribir leyes migratorias que han estado basadas en el racismo y la supremacía blanca. Estamos presentando la ruta hacia la libertad porque compartimos la creencia fundamental de que cada persona, sin importar su estado económico, raza o país de origen, merece dignidad, compasión y oportunidades laborales. Debemos ser un país que da la bienvenida a los inmigrantes, no uno que le da la espalda a aquellos que buscan refugio. Específicamente, la ruta hacia la libertad asegura un proceso justo, centrado en mantener a las familias juntas, invierte en alternativas más allá de la detención de personas, incrementa protecciones para todos los trabajadores sin importar su estado migratorio, establece sistemas humanos de seguridad en las fronteras y establece un sistema de migración justo. Debemos poner todos los horrores del gobierno de Trump en el pasado y asegurarnos que no vuelvan a ocurrir. Por eso aplaudo las acciones del presidente Biden en este tema: un alto a las deportaciones, un fin a la política de cero tolerancia que provocó la separación de familias, la restauración del programa DACA. La ruta hacia la libertad es un paso más allá que nos llevará a ser una nación que celebra la diversidad de nueva cuenta. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Representative Garcia, for your tireless leadership. And now I will turn it over to Laura Soto from the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. Laura.
Thank you so much for your invitation. It is my great honor, and I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors and every freedom fighter before me to speak to you today. My name is Laura Soto. I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, and raised bicultural in the US my entire life as an undocumented American. I currently have DACA, and thanks to DACA, I have worked in advocacy for underrepresented groups for many years now as a paralegal, professional translator and interpreter, community organizer, an archivist, a resource navigator, cultural broker, and independent living advisor for people with disabilities, all in Colorado. I have already raised 2 young US citizen adults as an undocumented single mother. And it is my children and the well-being of all of our children that fuels my mission to educate, integrate, heal, and empower our underrepresented communities in all of the United States. I am currently an operations manager at the Philanthropies Foundation based in Boulder County. And I have been a member of the Colorado Immigrants' Rights Coalition for over 7 years, where I have helped facilitate dialogue with Colorado state representatives, Boulder County Sheriff and District Attorney, and other policymakers to defend equal protections for undocumented immigrants under Colorado law. I am a member of the Latinx Advisory Committee to Congressman Joe Neguse, a member of the Parents Involved in Education of St. Vrain Valley School District, where parents in various positions of public services come together to bridge the education gap for our local Latinx families. And I am also co-founder of Colectivo Cultura and Voces Unidas of Boulder County. This is a historic moment we're in, and this is a great opportunity where CIRC and our allies know from firsthand experience the lives that we have lost from having a broken immigration system. For this reason, we bring forth the following necessary elements to include in the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. First off, I want to thank you for creating the roadmap. And secondly, please consider these elements. We need a clear and timely, sooner than 8 years, pathway to citizenship for the 12 million undocumented immigrants already living full lives and contributing in the US. Because 8 years wait still leads to deportation by attrition. We need a complete overhaul of the current broken immigration system that continues to destroy our communities and the entire nation. Also, we call for a full investigation of human rights violation, international laws, and crimes against humanity performed by ICE. The Department of Homeland Security must be held accountable for all violations committed before we move forward. As a documented single mother of 2 who gives back to my community every single day, I thank you for this resolution. It is so great to see a vision from our Congress members that lives up to the values that I instilled in my kids and that I fight for every single day. I thank you for laying out these clear steps down to that road to freedom for all this year. In COVID relief, with executive action from President Biden, like we've been celebrating already. In Congress, to legalize hardworking people, defund ICE, end deportation and detention, and so much more that's needed to stabilize our communities. I assure you that myself and the entire community I live in, we are ready to fight for this every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your story with us and all of your involvement and leadership in our communities. Congresswoman Clark, we're going to turn the floor to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Roxana. Let me thank my chairwoman of the Progressive Caucus on the Hill, Perla Jayapal, a dear friend and leader in the Congress. I'm honored to be with you today. Good afternoon and greetings to everyone. I'm Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, and I proudly represent New York's 9th Congressional District. I serve as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus's Immigration Task Force, and I'm a senior member of the House Committee on Homeland Security. I'm so pleased to join my colleagues here today and Firm Action members of the press and all of you streaming online. As the daughter of Jamaican immigrants, I understand the need for comprehensive immigration reform because of our immigration system is broken. It was not until the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that immigrants of predominantly Black countries could freely, without facing blatant discriminatory quotas, immigrate to the United States. Because of that, the idea of sweeping comprehensive immigration reform is still relatively new. The only way my parents were able to immigrate to the United States of America was because at the time of their immigration in the 1950s, they were British subjects. They were part of a colonial infrastructure that went into our Western Hemisphere. And thus they immigrated to the United States, not as Jamaicans, but as British subjects. I have seen the glaring inequities and civil rights violations that disproportionately impact immigrant families and communities of color. That is why I am so proud to co-lead this important resolution. The time has come for the values of our nation that they are reflected in our immigration policies. The Roadmap to Freedom resolution highlights our vision of the transformation of America's broken immigration system into one that is guided by dignity and centers and prioritizes our humanity. As many of you know, more than 19.8 million people who have immigrated to the United States support American families by providing healthcare, food, education, and other essential services, particularly more pronounced during this COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, many, including mixed status families, are excluded from most every federal pandemic relief, including access to testing, treatment, and food, and financial assistance. What a true juxtaposition of the fact that they are providing services that they themselves cannot even avail themselves of. Immigrants of color experience immigration inequities more than any other community, and immigrants, in particular, of European origin. Although Black immigrants excel in all sectors of society, they are disproportionately targeted by incarceration and deportation, where they experience abuse, hunger periods of detention, and make up more than 20% of those facing deportation, despite making up only 7% of the non-citizen population. So let me be very clear. Immigrants, regardless of status, contribute billions of dollars every year in taxes and to the American economy. Still, many of them cannot have access to safety provisions vital to ensuring that all communities can thrive. This is foundationally flawed, and it is wrong. The values, courage, and tenacity of the people who sought a better life should guide our efforts to support the immigrant community. We have to uphold our foundational commitment to liberty and justice for all. Reversing the policies of the last 4 years is not enough. We must reimagine the immigration system in a manner that is humane, just, and fair. I will not relent until our immigration system reflects a modern and equitable approach to this. And therefore, I am really honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with each and every one of you as we move to establish a new immigration order that centers the lives of those who have sacrificed so much to continue to live out the American dream and to make our nation great. Thank you for sharing this platform with me. And I look forward to our efforts being successful. Let us move forward and do the work. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay strong, and stay blessed. And don't forget to remain socially distant and wear a mask. And I yield back, as we say in the House of Representatives.
Thank you so much, Representative Clark. Your perseverance is so inspiring. Representative Escobar, we're going to go ahead and pass it to you now. Welcome.
Thank you, Roxana. Really appreciate this opportunity. And I want to express my deep gratitude to my dear friend and our fabulous leader, Representative Jayapal, who has really just exhibited the most incredible strength during some really tough times. So Pramila, sending you much love over the internet, and to my other colleagues and to everyone who is participating in this conversation. Thank you so much for your incredible commitment to our shared humanity. I'm Veronica Escobar, and I represent Texas' 16th Congressional District. I'm coming to you from the safe and secure U.S.-Mexico border, the community of El Paso. And as many of you know, El Paso, unfortunately, was ground zero for many of the Trump administration's most horrific and abhorrent anti-immigrant policies. We were the testing ground for family separation. We have been the location where massive numbers of expulsions have taken place, where vulnerable migrants have arrived at our front door, only to be greeted by a government that has used cruelty as a deterrent. The incredible cruelty that we have seen over the last 4 years did not begin in the last 4 years. And in fact, what we have seen in border communities like my own has been a militarization of the border that dates back decades. And what we have also seen and had to bear witness to is a federal government that treats migrants as criminals. Part of what is so inspiring and moving about the roadmap to freedom, and what makes me an absolutely enthusiastic supporter, is the fact that whole groups of people, the vulnerable migrants who look to us and look to communities like mine, communities that have become the new Ellis Island. But what has happened is they have been stripped of their humanity, but the roadmap to freedom re-engages our humanity and reinstills humanity in these vulnerable souls who just want a fair opportunity to participate in the American dream and to participate in a fair system that gives them a shot and an opportunity that, for many of us, myself included, born in the United States, did absolutely nothing to earn, but get to enjoy every single day. I'm a proud supporter of the roadmap to freedom because of the way that it ensures not just a fair immigration process, but that it welcomes immigrants by supporting integration efforts and ensuring access to critical public services like healthcare and housing. It recognizes that our strength as a country has always been greater when we welcome those who are seeking a better life. The roadmap to freedom invests in border policy that protects the rights of border communities like my own, and it ends wasteful spending, billions upon billions of dollars that have been used to militarize safe, beautiful, vibrant communities like my own. You know, I will close by saying this. in the face over the last, really not just a few years, but the last several years, as we have seen migrants arriving at our front door here in El Paso at the new Ellis Island, while our government has reacted in ways that have been shameful and really the antithesis of our foundation, my community and other communities across the country have reacted very differently. We have welcomed the stranger. We have looked to provide comfort and hospitality wherever possible. And we have truly embraced what America is about in the way that we open up our arms to people in need. I want all of America to be that way. We want all of America to be that way. And the roadmap to freedom helps us on that journey. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Representative Escobar, and for rooting us in the experiences of border communities that will be deeply impacted by this resolution. And now we will hear from Perla Silva from New York. Perla, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Perla Silva. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I am a member of the organization Make the Road New York. I just want to share, 3 years ago, my parents and I went to go visit my oldest sister and my brother-in-law in Fort Drum military base to spend the 4th of July weekend together. Upon the arrival, the military officers refused to accept their identification and insisted to call Customs and Border Patrol to arrest my parents. My parents were placed under ICE custody and were held at the Buffalo Federal Detention Center in Batavia, New York, for the 19 days. After paying $20,000 bond with the support of our fellow New Yorkers and across the country, I was reunited with my parents. But during those 19 days, after my 5-year-old daughter had seen her grandparents be put in handcuffs to be put into cages, she constantly asked about her grandparents, and I was just terrified of not being able to see them again. My parents were taken from us and put in cages, at the ICE detention facilities, despite having serious medical conditions that were required attention, which were denied. Last year, I lost my mother to COVID-19. And nothing can make up for that. But today I have tried to gather the strength to speak up and share my family's story to urge members of Congress to support the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. This resolution is a platform that outlines our values and principles, not only undo the harm imposed on the communities under the Trump administration, but reconstruct a just and humane immigration system. Over the last years, we have seen how abusive immigration enforcement agencies has unjustly separated families and terrorized our communities, not only at the border, but now more than ever, we have a chance to pass the Roadmap to Freedom resolution, organize and push forward to ensure the freedom of immigrants and prove permanent protection to all immigrants across the country. I appreciate your time and for having me. Thank you so much.
Perla, thank you so much for sharing a piece of your story with us. I know that in a moment of grief, sharing your hardship and your pain is so difficult, but we will use the story of your mother and everyone who has been harmed to move forward this resolution and fight for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And now we are joined today by Representative Chu. Representative Chu will pass the floor to you. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. And Perla, thank you for sharing your very moving story. And I am so sorry about your mother. My thoughts are with you. But your story shows why we need this roadmap to freedom. I and proud to be here with my colleagues to roll out this important plan for an immigration system that puts families first. And I'm proud to join them as an original co-sponsor of this resolution. And I'd like to thank our amazing chair of our Immigration Task Force of our Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, Perla Jayapal, who spearheaded this effort to put together this visionary framework. One aspect of the roadmap that is particularly important is that it appreciates the importance of family. In addition to the emotional benefits of keeping families together, there are real economic benefits as well. Immigrants who come with family are less likely to rely on government aid. They have an easier time starting businesses. But our current immigration system is still keeping far too many families apart. There are currently over 4 million people in the family immigration backlog waiting to reunite with their loved ones, 40% of whom are AAPIs. And waiting is hardly an option. The average wait time for a permanent resident to sponsor an unmarried son or daughter from Mexico is over 20 years. That's unacceptable. And now families are facing new obstacles as well. In addition to the systemic problems with our current immigration system, the Trump administration exacerbated the crisis of family separations by imposing racist Muslim bans and separating children from their parents at the border. While this resolution helps by recognizing that we must treat immigrants humanely and with dignity and find ways to make right these wrongs moving forward. We also must do more for immigrant workers. This pandemic has left no doubt in our minds that immigrants are critical to our economy, with almost 70% of undocumented immigrants working in essential jobs. They are healthcare workers, grocery store employees, agricultural workers, meat packers, and caregivers, people whom we all depend on. This resolution promotes increasing protections for immigrant workers by ensuring that they have safe working conditions and strong labor protections to safeguard them against employer retaliation. It also ensures that immigrants have access to healthcare and other crucial public services so that our communities can be healthier as a whole. It's time that we recognize that immigrants are assets to our economy and adopt policies that reflect their value and contributions. So I look forward to working with Firm Action and my colleagues here to put these principles into meaningful legislation. I'm optimistic that with the new administration, we can see actual change. In fact, in his first week in office, President Biden has actually embraced some of these ideas in his executive actions and in his day one immigration bill. I'm honored to be appointed a closer, one of the 7 members of Congress that is charged with pushing that bill forward in the House. And as the legislation comes together, you can count on me to make sure that this roadmap, as well as other protections for immigrants, are embraced and signed into law. So thank you again for inviting me to speak, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Chu. With leaders like you in the halls of Congress, I know immigrant families and all of us here organizing on the ground have strong leadership to fight for this resolution and a brighter vision for our future. And our final speaker, we are very excited to welcome Representative Ocasio-Cortez to the floor. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, welcome.
Thank you so much, Roxana, and thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal, our fearless leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and of course, in this incredibly critically important legislation in the roadmap to freedom for all of our immigrant brothers and sisters here throughout the United States. And, you know, I think, dare I say that this is not just a roadmap for our country, but hopefully this is a blueprint for our world, especially as we move forward throughout our lifetimes, and immigration and movement and the freedom of movement and expanding that freedom of movement to pursue life is going to be critically important in the decades to come, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. And the United States should be leading in those blueprints, and we should be leading in how and in models of just migration and immigration here and around the world. And I'm so proud of the work that Congresswoman Jayapal has put into this in leading that fight, because this is a model for our country. And so often we hear rhetoric about how we are a nation that embodies, embraces, and values and treasures the contributions of immigrants. And needless to say, over the last 4 years, but frankly, for much longer than that, we have not lived up to that rhetoric. And for a very long time, we have been overdue for policy that actually realizes the full potential of all people on our soil and who live on our soil, and to call this country home. And that's really what the roadmap to freedom does. And I think it's also incredibly important that we understand and really see the context with which this legislation is being introduced in a time when immigrant workers, whether they are farm workers, whether they are teachers, whether they are doctors, and the contributions of immigrant workers have been so valuable and so valued and so recognized as just so fundamental and life-saving and life-preserving in our society. It is time that we pair that with legislation that accurately values people's lives. And so I'm so proud to co-sponsor this legislation. I'm so proud to uplift it and to pursue it. And I believe a new day has come. We have seen this, I think, in the beginning executive orders of this administration. And even just yesterday with this incredible executive order where we're returning to this Obama era rule of ending private prisons. And many of our movement said, that's wonderful. We need to end for-profit private immigrant detention as well. And in fact, we need to imagine a world where our default isn't detention, but it is community-based and community support for people who wish to live in the United States and to create families and communities here. And I'm so incredibly excited. I'm so encouraged. And I truly believe that this is a roadmap and it is a template for all of us and for our country.
Thank you so much, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Truly an honor, and your words have inspired, I know, everyone here today. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for sharing your stories and the fight with all of us. We will keep marching forward on passing this resolution and making it a reality. And we do have some reporters watching who sent over some questions, so we'll go ahead and open it up. Representative Jayapal, the first question is from Nina Shapiro with the Seattle Times, and we'll direct this to you. And her question is, conservatives often talk about progressives having an open border policy. Do you believe in some kind of immigration enforcement toward people who cross the border without documentation or who are living in the US without documentation? If so, what would that enforcement look like? Would some people caught crossing the border be sent back? Would there be ICE or other agents enforcing immigration laws inside the country?
That is such a Shapiro question. She's covered immigration for a long time, so she wants to go right to the details. Look, here's the thing about the resolution. It is a broad set of principles. And when it comes to who comes to the country, who stays in the country, what we believe and what the resolution clearly lays out is that we should not criminalize people for seeking refuge in our country and for responding to the call of workers that we have in our country. And when we have a system that is working, what you would have would be scalable consequences. So in other words, somebody who is here seeking refugee status should be able to go through a full system. And if at some point there needs to be some sort of consequence, it should be related to whatever happened. That is not the case in our immigration system right now. So we have stuck to broad principles in this resolution. We will continue to fight for legislation that mirrors these principles so that there should not be a criminalizing, which frankly has happened for decades now. Obviously, Donald Trump took all the tools that were given to him, used horrific, xenophobic, racist ways of making immigrants a political football. But let me be clear that I've been fighting for immigrant rights for 20 years. And the reality is there were policies promoted by both Republican and Democratic administrations that criminalized migration. That needs to stop.
Thank you so much, Representative Jayapal. Our next question is from Erica Conat with Aldea News, and we'll open this up to whoever would like to answer. Despite President Biden's executive orders to pause deportations, ICE facilities across the country are defying his orders and moving forward with select deportations. What does this signal in terms of a future with ICE, if you think there even is one? And what will future DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas need to answer for?
I'm happy to start. I bet others have something to say about this as well. But we are really pleased that Alejandro Mayorkas has been nominated for DHS Secretary. We've worked with him before. He understands the immigration system. And I think a lot of the things that we're seeing immediately are coming from his direction out of the Biden administration. I have a bill called Dignity for Detained Immigrants, and it completely transforms the detention system. The detention system in this country is criminalizes immigrants. It uses private prisons. As Alexandria, as my colleague, Representative Ocasio-Cortez said, we need to make sure that it's great that we're ending the use of private prisons for the criminal justice system. We need to end the use of private detention centers, which have been shown over and over again to never follow any human rights protocols or guidelines that are set out. So my belief is that if we actually reform the immigration system and we allow people to be here that we need and that are with their family members, then you actually take away all of these people that are being put into detention. That population goes down significantly. And then you can have scalable consequences for people that do need to somehow be in an enforcement system, but they can be community-based alternatives, like alternatives to detention. But first you have to reduce the numbers of people that are actually being detained, and then you put in place the alternatives. So that's how we envision this. And that requires the full reform of the policies of immigration for refugees, for asylees, for the family migration system, for the border crossings, all of those pieces.
Thank you, Representative Jayapal. And we have a similar related question from the same reporter, Erica Conat with Aldea News. Maybe we'll kick this to Representative Ocasio-Cortez. The mental toll is vastly underreported on the prolonged separation of families, especially with very young children who are subjected to the most trauma and even face disassociation or loss of familiarity with loved ones. Have there been any talks of providing mental health assistance for refugees and for those children who remain separated because the government has essentially lost their parents?
Yeah, I think that initial point that this is something that is being underreported is absolutely correct. What the Trump administration did and what every person involved in child separation did was engage in a massive scale of human rights violations that severely traumatized children and parents and guardians, family members for life. And I don't think that that is something that we should sugarcoat or try to brush under the rug. And because of that, it is, my belief that the United States owes these families. And whether that is in the form of guaranteed health care, whether it is in the form of expediting their citizenship, there are many, many forms of relief that we owe as part of paying our debt as a country for the great moral wrong that was done in our name. And there have been many conversations. I know We've discussed this as a caucus, and I know that Congresswoman Jayapal has also led on many of these efforts, which, by the way, I would say include systemically in our decisions, not just in policy tailored on immigration, but in all policy. When we decide to, for example, with Medicare for All, saying that immigrants should be covered, when we fight for frontline workers to be included in stimulus checks, this is not just about targeted immigration policy, but this is about all of our policy honoring the contributions of immigrants, including in healthcare and mental health care. But it is absolutely correct that this is not something that we have forgotten, and it is not something that we will forget, because whether it is child separation or whether it was the kind of horrifying medical procedures in Georgia detention facilities without consent, we owe these families for the rest of their lives. Period. Because the trauma that was inflicted upon these families, they will live with for the rest of their lives. And it is not their responsibility to have to garner the resources when the most powerful and wealthy country on earth was the one that inflicted this harm.
Thank you, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Representative Jayapal, we have another question from you from Como News in our home state of Washington. Why introduce a resolution or statement of principles rather than actual legislation?
Thank you. That's a great question. What we wanted to do is we understand that there will be lots of places where immigration policy will get done. And of course, we hope for a robust bill to pass, such as the Biden Day One plan, strengthened in a few places. But we also think that there might be other opportunities where individual pieces of legislation may move. And we want to make sure that there is a guiding vision, a guiding blueprint, a framework that really defines all the different areas of immigration policy that need to be completely reimagined and re-envisioned. So this is that blueprint. No matter what piece of legislation we're looking at, we can look at this blueprint and say it contains all of the facets of humane immigration policy that we need to, together as a country, make sure gets enacted.
Thank you, Representative Jayapal. We need to have a vision. So thank you. And this is our last question that we'll take. And this question is directed to you, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. It's from Wayne Ayers from Where is the Buzz? There are members of Congress that have a real issue with immigrant rights. How do you convince some of these members to get on board with the Roadmap to Freedom resolution?
Well, I think this is an excellent question. And I think it's really interesting, as we've been talking about on this call, is that I think that the pandemic has really reframed a lot of these issues for many people. And some people may not think of it this way, but they're actually quite conservative pockets in my district as well. And we never answer to that by ignoring our neighbors. We always engage them directly. And one of the most effective, ways that I have found to engage people and help win this argument is by asking something very simple. Who do you think prepares your food? Where does your celery come from? Who are your doctors? Who are the people teaching your kids? And that generally tends to reframe the entire conversation rather quickly. And especially in the context of COVID, it's really given pause to a lot of, frankly, many of my colleagues that either had explicitly anti-immigrant stances on the other side of the aisle or just had reservations, had kind of given it up to this idea of, this false idea of immigrants are takers or didn't wait in line, all of these false myths. And so sometimes we ask these questions. And even when it comes to a specific proposal, for example, would you want the person who is serving your food to be unvaccinated? Would you want the person who is caring for your children to not be able to go to a doctor and maybe get them sick and help spread, disease? No. And so I think when we ask these insightful questions that are not intended to start an argument or a debate, but actually reveal the interconnectedness and the reliance that we have on our immigrant communities in our lives, where we realize that relief and freedom for our immigrant communities means relief and freedom for us too, and that our destinies are tied. And the more that we deny our immigrant communities their rights and freedom, the less freedom that we'll enjoy in our lives as well. And I think that that's why I think this moment is also such a singularly important moment for immigrant organizing. That's why I'm so thrilled that Representative Jayapal has just hit the ground running. We're like not even 4 weeks into this term, and we have a roadmap on immigration reform, or rather immigration policy down. And it's because this moment is singularly important for immigration, and it may not feel that way or strike that way to some people at first blush, but we have never had a public consciousness on the importance and critical value of immigrants in our country like we have right now. And it's important for us to strike while the iron's hot.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, for rooting us in not only the content and the vision, but the moment and why we have to fight. And with that, I want to thank everyone, all of the incredible Congress representatives that were here with us today, to you, Laura and Perla, for courageously sharing your stories. It is an honor to do the work that we do, fighting to make this country a better place for Black, Brown, immigrant, refugee, and Latinx people. It is an honor to have champions in Congress like all of you fighting with us to bring our vision to fruition. And this is just the beginning. Thank you, everyone.